Last section was an absolute roller coaster. We see the MC not just as a warlord, but as a true nation builder, dazzling Tang Yao with a vision for medicine that's leagues ahead, systematic research, public health, not just individual cures. Her awe at the Han tribe's progress, from warships to a simple heated Kang, perfectly frames their advancement. The MC masterfully pivots Tang Yao's tech request into a profound discussion on medical philosophy, then unveils a sophisticated assimilation plan for the Tang tribe using trade and labor, soft power at its finest. Then, bam, the scene shifts to Kaiyuan Commandery, and the tension spikes. The reveal of the enemy coalition's staggering size, 50-60K, was a gut punch, but the ensuing cannon demonstration, utterly epic. Xue Tu's skepticism melting into stunned silence as that iron ball obliterated targets from incredible distances. Priceless. The Han tribe isn't just advancing. They're about to unleash a new era of warfare. How will these God's Wrath cannons fare against the massive oncoming Horde? That world-shattering shot directly blasted everyone's worldview to smithereens. Good heavens, this thing was hardly a weapon made by mortals. Seeing that everyone was still hungry for more, Ying Rui had his men switch to chain shot and grape shot, firing one of each. These two rounds didn't have quite the same insane range, but their area of effect, tisk. It was practically an area of effect attack. The terrifying effect of the chain shot and grape shot, sweeping down a huge area, especially made several top military figures nearly have their eyes pop out. They muttered to themselves, "Good Lord, if this thing were fired into a crowd of men and horses, wouldn't they fall like wheat being harvested, a whole swathe of them?" Xue Tu instantly became the cannon's #1 die-hard fan. He was so clingy, latching onto the instructor and refusing to let go, insisting that the man break down and explain every last detail of this precious new toy's principles and firing techniques. Now the bigwigs were thoroughly convinced by Ying Rui's heresy. Oh no, by his words. With this super weapon, what did the enemy count for? They could just steamroll them, and that would be that. Over the next few days, the 100+ instructors were split up, with every 2 assigned to 1 cannon. They also conscripted able-bodied men from the city. Oh no, they requisitioned artisans and garrison soldiers to form temporary artillery crews. The enemy army was bearing down on them. Time was tight, and Kaiyuan Commandery's heart was in its throat. They could only train and test fire with desperate intensity. All the leading figures of Kaiyuan Commandery gathered together, chattering, and debating how to fight the upcoming battle. They definitely had to defend, but how to defend, that was a complex matter. Someone suggested, "Our city has mountains of grain and fodder, and we have cannons, which are practically cheat level. Weapons. Let's just hole up like turtles in their shells. When the enemy comes, we'll blast them a few times. Guaranteed to scare the piss out of them." That sounded reasonable enough. If they really did that, the enemy would most likely be scared off. But what about next time? What if the enemy regrouped and returned? Could they count on scaring them off every time? Wasn't that just passive defense waiting to take a beating? It was basically giving up and doing nothing. I disagree. As soon as Xue Tu heard this, he flew off the handle. He shot to his feet and began to retort spittle. Flying. Our outer city doesn't even have decent walls. Defend what, my ass? Are we really going to cower in the inner city and just hand over the outer city we worked so hard to build? Besides, since last year the chief has been practically selling the pots and pans to build up our cavalry. Now that it's finally starting to look like something, you want us to dismount and scale city walls? What did we train so hard with the cavalry for? To be a ceremonial guard? Most importantly, what's our objective this time? I think we should take the initiative and hit them with a defensive counterattack. We have such awesome weapons. Why should we cower in the city like sitting ducks? If we can cripple them, crush them, and scar them for life in one battle, so that they tremble whenever they hear our name, then why not go for a decisive blow? It's not like we don't have the strength for it. Someone immediately sang a different, tune-in response to Xue Tu's aggressive speech. I say, old Xue, what we're after now is stability and development, not just fighting and killing all day long. Bullshit! Before Xue Tu could even speak, Chai Duo, commander of the Qianyu Guard, who also had a fiery temper, jumped in to back Xue Tu up, guns blazing. You think scaring the enemy off this time settles it? That they won't come back? That kind of stability is a joke. Only by thoroughly beating them into submission, by making them fear us, can we achieve true stability. That's the hard truth. All right, that's enough from all of you. Seeing that these rough and tumble men were about to come to blows, Ying Rui slammed his hand on the table with a smack and brought out the strategic policy you had set last year, which was as good as an imperial decree. The chief has already spoken. If we are to fight, then we must crush the enemy completely in one go, beat them to a pulp, give them no chance to catch their breath or cause trouble again. Those were the chief's exact words. Therefore, I declare, we will fully cooperate with the garrison's strategy of active defense. If necessary, we can even pursue them out of the city. To expand our victory, we must follow the chief's directive and beat the enemy until they can't take care of themselves, until the mere thought of the Han tribe makes their assholes clench, and they never dare act presumptuously before us again. Once the chief's directive was announced, the crowd, who had just been arguing until they were red in the face, fell instantly silent. No one dared to utter another peep. Seeing this, Ying Rui nodded in satisfaction. The strategic direction is set. Now let's discuss tactics. Active defense is the right approach, but the specifics of how to execute it need careful consideration. After all, once the main army moves outside the city, if the enemy plays dirty, splitting their forces to besiege us while another part sneak attacks our home base, then our Kaiyuan commandery would be in grave danger. None of us can bear that kind of loss. The group fell silent for a moment before Xue Tu spoke up first. These past few days, I've studied the use of cannons and their logistical support inside out, Xue Tu said with complete confidence. I've analyzed it, and we should push our main camp directly 3 kilometers outside the city. Let me explain the reasons for doing so. First, the maximum range of the cannons is about 3 kilometers. At this position, we can fully deploy our army for a head-on confrontation. With cannons and a wagon fort holding the line, the enemy wants to break through our defenses in their dreams. Moreover, this kind of open terrain is where the cannon's devastating power can be best unleashed. Secondly, if the enemy tries to play the game of surrounding us without attacking, they're dreaming. We have the range advantage. Whether to fight and when to fight is our call. If they dare to surround us and stay put, hey, they'll just be serving as live targets for our artillery battalion. Furthermore, if the enemy gets reckless and insists on splitting their forces, one part to pin us down, another to probe our city walls, we can use our cannons for long-range fire support. As long as they dare to bypass us to attack the city, their rears will be completely exposed to our muzzles. If they really dare to court death like that, maybe we can even turn the tables and encircle them like dumplings, trapping at least half of them at the foot of the city walls and gobbling them up in one bite. After Xue Tu laid out this series of combined arguments, everyone listened and nodded repeatedly. Even those who had advocated for the turtle in its shell tactic couldn't find any fault with it now. There was no denying it. Xue Tu's plan was pretty much the most sound option at present. The frontline camp and the rear city were both within cannon range. It was truly a situation where they could advance to attack or retreat to defend, placing them in an invincible position. Ying Rui was also quite optimistic about this plan and nodded. He then asked, "Does anyone else have anything to add?" Chai Duo stroked his chin, thought for a moment and said, "I think we need to urgently increase the amount of cannon training. It's not just the men who need to train. Our war horses need to train too. Those pampered horses haven't seen much action like this, and they'll be closer to the muzzles than the enemy. We can't have them spooking our own horses before they scare the enemy. That would be a real farce, and the loss would outweigh the gain. I have no objections to the rest of the plan, but these details must be thought through in advance. lest a small oversight leads to a major disaster, and then it'll be too late for regrets. "Oh right, there's one more thing," Xue Tu added. "After the main army leaves the city, communication with the inner city will be a big problem. It's 6 LE, a Chinese unit of distance, approximately 3 kilometers or 1.86 miles. You definitely can't see that far with the naked eye. So how will we know if the enemy has split their forces to attack the city? If they do, how will the garrison in the city call for our help? These are all critical details." "That's right. This point is indeed important," someone immediately agreed. "So what do we use for communication? Can drums carry that far? I doubt it. How about we leave a few cannons on the city walls and fire them as signals?" "Firing. Cannons? Isn't that too extravagant? Gunpowder is so precious, one shot and that's pure silver gone. I think it's better to use the old method. Lighting wolf smoke signals is good enough, economical and practical. Actually, given the Hani tribe's current technology tree, lighthouses would be the flashiest option for real-time communication. Just by adding a flashing light system to existing lighthouses, they could transmit messages via Morse code over dozens of li. However, its drawbacks were also quite glaring. First, it was a money burner. The construction and maintenance costs were painfully expensive. Second, during the day it was basically useless. No matter how bright the light, who could see it under the bright sun? Utterly ineffective. Moreover, lighthouses didn't quite fit the current tense hair-trigger situation. So, after much deliberation, the leaders decided to use the most primitive and down-to-earth method. Wolf smoke, smoke by day, fire by night. Simple and crude, but honest and reliable. With the strategy and tactics decided, the next step was to relocate and drill without pause. The army outside the city struck camp and moved in a vast procession to a location 3 kilometers due west of Kaiyuan City. The new encampment used a wooden stockade defense line, with multiple layers of cheval de frise set up both inside and out, specifically to guard against enemy cavalry night raids. Several artillery positions were also dug in. Advance around the camp, no matter which corner the enemy might pop out from. The Han tribe could quickly mobilize firepower to give them a surprise. The common folk from the outer city also urgently evacuated into the main city. They packed up whatever belongings they could carry. Fortunately, those pastoralist brethren had only recently joined the organization and didn't have many possessions, so there wasn't much to move. As for their houses, there was truly nothing to be done. If the enemy demolished them, they would just have to accept their losses and rebuild later. In the army camp outside the city, scouts and mounted patrols roamed the surroundings daily as, if injected with chicken blood, terrified of a sudden enemy attack. The training grounds within the camp were even more bustling. Every day was filled with the boom, boom of cannons, the earth-shattering shouts of soldiers training, and the neighing of horses. It was practically noisier than a wet market. At this critical juncture, Ying Rui and Yuji each wrote you a letter reporting on the frontline situation. Ying Rui's letter primarily detailed Kaiyuan Commandery's battle plans and defensive preparations. It was clear and well organized, obviously the result of careful work. Yuji's, on the other hand, was full of unsubstantiated rumors gathered from within enemy ranks, a mix of truth and falsehood, reality and illusion. Comparing the two letters, you finally got a complete grasp of the situation on the steppe. This time, they really had to roll up their sleeves and fight. There was no escaping it. However, you weren't flustered in the slightest. To be honest, the Han tribe had been holding back a big move and preparing for this battle for a long time. In terms of both weaponry and strategy, they were several versions ahead of the enemy, a crushing advantage. If they could still lose under these circumstances, it would be an utter disgrace to all transmigrators. 20,000 against 60,000, is it? You mulled over the numbers, your heart calm and untroubled. Even if the Han tribe were to stumble at worst, they could retreat into the inner city and defend to the death. The worst outcome wouldn't be too dire. You could still bear such a loss. Therefore, you had no intention of personally commanding at the front lines for this campaign. Firstly, there definitely wasn't enough time. By the time you arrived, it would be too late. Secondly, it was a good opportunity to properly train these soldiers and generals under your command, allowing them to mature quickly. If you had to personally oversee everything, what would be the point of having them? As mascots? In the future, as the Han tribe's operations expanded further and further, were you really going to work yourself to death? However, what you were most concerned about was how the entire political landscape of the steppe would change after this battle was over, when fighting nomadic tribes, trying to annihilate them completely, was pure wishful thinking. These fellows knew better than anyone how to preserve their strength. If they could win, they'd charge forward, howling and plunder as much as they could. If they couldn't win, they'd slip away as fast as greased lightning, quicker than rabbits, making them difficult to pursue. However, you had no intention of giving them any more chances to cause trouble. Since things had already come to a head and pretenses were dropped, you had to beat them into submission once and for all, beat them until they questioned their very existence, so they wouldn't dare entertain any improper thoughts again. Thinking of this, you made a swift decision and immediately set off for Weishan Commandery. You had to personally oversee the outfitting progress of the gunboat. If it could be ready in time, you were determined to make that Modun taste what it felt like to have a home, but be unable to return to it. Since Xue Tu had been appointed to lead the gunboat project, the behemoth had been moved to Weishan Commandery for subsequent outfitting. Because the later stages required less carpentry work, the docks at Weishan Commandery, being closer to Lake Horde Island and Shingang Commandery, were more suitable for this kind of precision work. It took you a day to reach Weishan Commandery. You boarded the colossal ship without delay, summoned Xue Tu, and had him report in detail on the ship's outfitting progress. "Chief, look," Xue Tu pointed excitedly at the ship's interior. "The command communication pipes on board have all been installed. Each deck has speaking tubes and horns, all leading to the command platform on the top level of the stern castle. You just need to shout into those brass horns, and the commanders and gunners on all the decks below will hear you loud and clear. Waterproofing is also progressing rapidly, all thanks to the asphalt you brought, Chief. That stuff is truly amazing. Apart from the strong smell, it's far superior to the fish bladders we used before. The key is that there's plenty of it and it gets the job done. Who would have thought you could refine such a treasure from coal mines?" You nodded faintly, already immune to this kind of subtle flattery. Extracting asphalt from coal tar wasn't exactly high technology in the modern era. What mattered was that it could be produced and put to use. How are the other aspects coming along? You were more concerned with practical matters. "I just want to know when this ship can be taken out to fight." "You can count on it, Chief." Xue Tu thumped his chest in assurance. "The gun decks on all levels are fully fitted out, and the fixed tracks and cannons are all installed. The gunners are now practicing rapid loading on board like madmen." After a pause, Xue Tu hesitated slightly and said, "But Chief, I've been watching them train with the cannons for a while now, and it seems that using the cannons on this ship isn't as smooth as with those land-based gun carriages. It's mainly because the space is too small and there are too many cannons, making it crowded. So I think there's still room for improvement with these cannons." "Oh? How so?" You looked at him with a half-smile, wanting to test his perceptiveness. "Well, I think," Xue Tu scratched his head, "it would definitely be better to modify the ship's cannons to be loaded with gunpowder and cannonballs from the rear. That way, not only would it save a lot of operating space, but it would also greatly increase the rate of fire, definitely taking the power of this new weapon to the next level. Just look at the crew's speed now. It's considered fast. If they can load one shot in 40 breaths, this seriously diminishes the terrifying power the cannons should have." "You're right," you nodded approvingly. "I also considered breech-loading cannons from the start, but with our Han tribe's current technological level, it's still too difficult to produce usable ones. For now, let's make do with these muzzle loaders." Being a bit slower doesn't matter. You comforted him. Anyway, right now we're the only ones doing the attacking. Others don't have the means to retaliate. This advantage alone is enough for us to dominate. Any tribe near the water? The chief is right, hey hey hey. Xue Tu chuckled dryly and continued to show you around the ship. Below the main deck there were a full 6 levels of compartments. The bottom 3 were all storerooms. The lowest level was packed with various food reserves. The second level held neatly stacked assorted cannonballs, and the third level was the critical area for storing gunpowder. Counting upwards, levels 4 to 6 were the 3 gun decks above the waterline, serving as both combat stations and living quarters for the crew. All the cannons were installed snugly against the sides of the ship. The space cleared in the ice. Middle was ingeniously designed by you into 3-tiered bunks, similar to those commonly seen on trains, to provide resting places for the crew. On the stern castle, above the main deck, the first level housed the galley and mess hall. Placing these facilities up high was mainly for fire safety and ventilation, to avoid an accidental ammunition magazine explosion, which would be a disaster. Additionally, next to the mess hall, a small space was specifically allocated for a set of blacksmithing equipment, convenient for repairing various ironware on board at any time. Finally, you arrived at the combat command room on the second level of the stern castle, which was even more elaborately furnished. A long conference table, a huge map hanging on the wall, and an exquisite sand table in the corner. Everything was there. On the high command platform, a row of gleaming brass speaking tubes was installed, carefully labeled with corresponding areas, making it easy for the commander-in-chief to issue orders to various posts. The command platform was surrounded by a ring of bright glass windows, allowing the commander-in-chief an unobstructed view of the surroundings, second only to the crow's nest at the top of the mast. To prevent rats from causing damage, several spirited tabby cats were specially kept on board, a truly considerate measure. Finally, you personally inspected the sails and rigging on the main deck once more. After confirming that everything was in proper order, you gave the order to assemble the soldiers and prepare to set sail for battle. Before departure, you were in high spirits and personally took up a brush to bestow the name Fubo, wave, subduer, warship upon this giant vessel. You also had flags made and hoisted high on the masthead. The striking characters Fubo were painted on both sides of the bow and on the stern, exuding an imposing and domineering aura. 3 days vanished in the blink of an eye. The air in Kaiyuan Commandery grew heavier each day, becoming suffocating. Although the herdsmen gritted their teeth and continued to graze their livestock outside, their hearts were already restless, suspicious of every sound, day in and day out. At the slightest sign of trouble, they wished they could sprout wings and fly back to the city to hide. On the 12th day of the first month of the second year of the Han tribe's Jianyuan era, just as the sky was beginning to lighten, a long overdue storm finally tore through the false calm of this grassland. On the periphery, a team of Han tribe scouts and mounted patrols were conducting their routine rounds. Suddenly, a cloud of dust that blotted out the sky rose from the southwest. The sight was terrifying, as if the end of the world was nigh, making people's hearts pound. Despite this, these daring mounted scouts decided to risk their lives to get closer and investigate. After all, intelligence was king. Unfortunately, before they could get close to the enemy's main force, they were caught by the enemy's outer scouts. Both sides were cavalry. What was there to be polite about? A small-scale skirmish involving several hundred horsemen instantly erupted on the vast grassland. The clash of weapons, horses thundering, arrows raining down. The scene was chaotic for a time. On the Han tribe's side, experienced veterans provided cover fire with well-aimed shots from the rear, while the more nimble scouts, without a second thought, wheeled their horses around and galloped madly towards the main camp. As they ran, they desperately blew the long ox-horn bugles hanging from their chests. Woo, woo, woo! The desolate and oppressive sound of the horn spread outwards like ripples in water. Nearby herdsmen, hearing this dire alarm, were scared out of their wits. Heedless of anything else, they frantically cracked their long whips, driving their cattle and sheep, and ran for their lives towards the city. When they encountered other herdsmen on the road, they didn't forget to shout warnings to each other. For a while, the area outside Kaiyuan City was in utter chaos. The distant dust cloud drew closer and closer, like a giant beast choosing its prey. The Han tribe's mounted scouts galloped at full speed, continuously firing arrows at the pursuing enemy behind them, hoping to shake off these tenacious pursuers. The scouts who had managed to race back first finally returned to the camp outside, the city shaken but unharmed. However, before they could even open their mouths to report, they stared dumbfounded at the sight before them. In the camp, tens of thousands of armored soldiers, weapons in hand, had already assembled in formation. Ready for battle. Report. Modun's army of tens of thousands is attacking. They are less than 15 li to the southwest. One scout, having blown his horn all the way, his face flushed crimson either from excessive tension or oxygen deprivation from blowing too hard, galloped wildly to the camp gate. He nimbly dismounted, lifting his iron armor, raised his scout banner high, and reported breathlessly to several commanding officers. "Men, light the wolf smoke beacon. Alert Kaiyuan City." "Yes, sir. Hearing." The scout's alarm, Chai Duo of the Qianyu Guard, acted decisively, being the first to order an alert to be sent to the city. Regardless of anything else, the city gates had to be secured first. "Have you ascertained the enemy's exact numbers?" Xue Tu's gaze was like a torch as he pressed the scout. "Reporting to the commander, we were unable to ascertain. We only saw the enemy's 10,000 horses galloping, their banners obscuring the sun, many of them Modun's large yellow banners." Hearing this, Xue Tu frowned slightly, clearly somewhat dissatisfied. However, he also knew that this was just the initial contact, and it was unrealistic to expect these scouts to gather too much valuable intelligence. Seeing so many enemies for the first time, not wetting their pants on the spot, already indicated strong mental fortitude. So he simply waved his hand and ordered, "Scout again." The scout acknowledged the order and quickly galloped out again. To obtain more accurate intelligence, Xue Tu and Chai Duo dispatched even more scouts to reconnoiter. Among them were some incorporated herdsman cavalry, who were more familiar with the various factions on the grassland and might be able to gather more useful information. At the Kaiyuan Commandery main camp, Xue Tu and Chai Duo were not idle either. They quickly led their troops out of the camp. Outside the stockade, they swiftly set up artillery positions and a wagon fort, while the main army formed up behind the wagons, adopting a stance ready for a head-on clash. On the battlefield ahead, the mounted scouts from both sides were still fiercely entangled. They exchanged blows, and arrows flew through the air like swarms of locusts, with men screaming and falling from their horses from time to time, their fates unknown. The Han tribe was well equipped with full sets of iron armor, standardized composite bows, and iron arrowheads with solid wooden shafts. In terms of penetration power, range, and cavalry defense, Modun's motley forces were no match. However, the mounted scouts sent out by Modun were undoubtedly the elite of the elite. Their equipment was top tier on their side. Leather armor, overlaid with bamboo armor, double protection, truly VIP treatment. Their war horses were also equipped with double stirrups, and their riders possessed superb horsemanship and excellent archery skills. Although it was difficult to kill a Han tribe cavalryman outright with a single arrow, they specialized in targeting the horses, and their skill at shooting horses dead was first-rate. Han tribe cavalrymen who lost their war horses were soon overwhelmed by the enemy's tide of hooves, amidst the grieving and indignant gazes of their comrades. However, looking at the overall casualty ratio, the Han tribe still had the upper hand. While not as exaggerated as 1 Han soldier equals 5 barbarians, achieving a ratio of 1 against 2 or 3 was not a problem. As wave after wave of mounted scouts risked their lives to reconnoiter, the intelligence gathered at the main camp became increasingly detailed and complete. Report. Modun's allied forces, numbering around 60,000, are attacking. The army is carrying several hundred bamboo and wooden ladders long enough to reach the top of the city walls. Report: the Snowfield Wolf Tribe's animal hide banner has appeared on the enemy's right flank. Their strength is approximately 5,000. Reporting to the commander. 3,000 soldiers in yellow clothing and bamboo armor have been spotted on the enemy's left flank, flying the banner of the Shin tribe. Report: the enemy's baggage train consists of about 1,000 carts. They are carrying over 10,000 head of cattle and sheep. Report: the enemy has approximately 30,000 light cavalry, each with 2 horses, well armed with strong bows and ample arrows, mostly wearing leather armor. Reporting to the commander. The enemy has approximately 10,000 heavy armored lancers deployed in the center of their army. Both men and horses are heavily armored, mostly equipped with round shields. Under the Han tribe's main command banner, one scout after another continuously relayed the latest intelligence. The personal guards around them listened, their hearts pounding, and they gasped in unison. Good heavens, this enemy's equipment was too luxurious. It sounded like it wasn't much inferior to the Han tribes at all. This was truly a sign they were going to fight to the death. Xue Tu and Chai Duo listened to this intelligence with varying expressions. Chai Duo wore a grim face, silent, clearly not in a good mood. Xue Tu, on the contrary, was flushed with excitement, his eyes glinting with a bloodthirsty light, as if he could already smell the smoke of war. Just then, 2 more scouts galloped back to the camp together from outside. As soon as they entered the camp, before they even dismounted, they began to shout at the top of their lungs, "Bad news! Bad news! Suritu, that bastard, is attacking." "Tu?" Hearing this, Xue Tu's face instantly darkened. He pointed at the clamoring mounted scout and roared, "Insolence! How dare you spread baseless rumors within the camp and shake the army's morale? Men, drag this fellow out and execute him as a warning." "Yes, sir." Several wolf-like personal guards immediately swarmed forward and dragged the unlucky fellow from his horse. Before the man could even cry out his innocence twice, with a thwack, a head rolled onto the ground, splattering blood everywhere. "You speak. What exactly is the situation?" Xue Tu glared murderously at the other mounted scout, who was trembling with fear, and said coldly, "If you dare to speak nonsense again, his fate will be your example." Reporting to the commander. The mounted scout was so frightened he could barely speak coherently. Suritu is leading 10,000 light cavalry. They've come from the north now. Now they've stopped about 10 li in front of our position and are observing. Did he state his intentions? Chai Duo, frowning, interjected from the side. He said, the scout's voice was as faint as a mosquito's buzz. He said he's here to reinforce us. Ridiculous. Xue Tu was so angered by this answer that he actually laughed, unable to stop himself from questioning repeatedly. Reinforce us? If he's here to reinforce us, why didn't he send word in advance? If he's here to reinforce us, why didn't he come directly to my main camp and join forces with my army? I think this fellow is also a scheming character, definitely up to no good. Chai Duo couldn't help but curse indignantly. However, I doubt he dares to fight us head-on. He's most likely trying to sit on the fence again, observing both sides. If we lose this battle, I'm afraid he'll immediately turn around and help Modun beat us up. Send a troop of mounted scouts to warn him off. Xue Tu waved his hand decisively and ordered, "Tell him not to stir up trouble here. Otherwise, I'll deal with him too. Also, have men keep a close eye on his movements. Report any unusual activity immediately." "Yes, sir." Xue Tu didn't take Suritu seriously at all. In his eyes, this guy was even less of a threat than Modun. Modun at least dared to fight the Han tribe head-on. Suritu, a fence-sitter who only knew how to hedge his bets and go with the flow, was the most disgusting kind. If you were genuinely here to show loyalty, then come over directly. What was the meaning of just standing by, watching a show? Suritu's uninvited arrival indeed caught the Han tribe off guard. Even Yuji, who was specifically in charge of intelligence, hadn't received any wind of it beforehand. It was understandable. Recently, Modun and the Shin tribe had been making too much noise, attracting everyone's attention. Suritu had always been relatively docile, playing the part of a subservient grandson quite convincingly, so it was excusable that he hadn't been noticed. However, the bigwigs in Kaiyuan Commandery weren't too flustered. Because just as they thought, even if Suritu had a few extra guts, he wouldn't dare bare his teeth at the Han tribe for the time being. He was different from Modun. Modun at least had the Shin tribe as a backer, who could provide him with plenty of good things, ensuring he wouldn't starve. Suritu couldn't do that. He was now a lone commander, completely reliant on leeching off the Han tribe. Once he fell out with the Han tribe and his supplies of grain and materials were cut off, Modun, backed by the Shin tribe, would definitely be the first to jump out and finish him off, swallowing up his meager assets without leaving a crumb. Of course, Suritu wasn't without other options. For example, he could kowtow to Modun and become his underling, but that was unthinkable. Suritu was an ambitious man, otherwise he wouldn't have struck out on his own in the first place. If he had truly intended to be Modun's dog, he would have been wagging his tail and begging 2 years ago. Why wait until the Han tribe had established a firm foothold on the grassland to remember? It didn't align with his interests. Therefore, Xue Tu, Chai Duoduo, and the others didn't take Suritu too seriously. For now, keeping a close watch on him was enough. As long as their side didn't show any obvious signs of defeat, Suritu wouldn't dare act rashly. In fact, if it looked like their side was about to win, that fellow might even be the first to charge forward and help them kick the enemy while they were down. Doing so offered many benefits for Suritu. First, he could take the opportunity to curry favor with the Han tribe, earning a reputation for providing timely aid, which would make future dealings smoother. Second, eliminating Modun wasn't just to please the Han tribe, it was for himself. Think about it. If Modun was finished, wouldn't Suritu be the only major nomadic power left on the grassland? To gain greater influence with the Han tribe in the future, Suritu would absolutely strike Modun lethally, pursuing him relentlessly. Xue Tu paid no more attention to Suritu's affairs. His entire focus was on Modun's massive army, which was about to surge forward. Modun's side, though lacking the Han tribe's strict and meticulous military system, had also developed its own way of fighting. The Han tribe's regular army operated under the garrison system, Weisuo system, where all actions were coordinated by organization, flags, and drums, with orders strictly followed. The herdsmen who had joined them were incorporated into the military agricultural colony system, Tunhu system, organized by household registration, and also followed the commands of drums and flags. Modun was more rudimentary. They also had flags, and horns, and even bronze gongs, all learned from the Han tribe. However, they didn't have drums, because those were difficult to make, and the Shin tribe didn't yet have the technology to produce decent war drums. Moreover, Modun's army organization was not uniform. They basically still operated on the model of a tribal confederation. Whether it was the tribes he had subdued by force, or those who had voluntarily submitted to him, they were still organized according to their original tribal structures. As a result, the combat effectiveness of the various tribes was naturally uneven, some good, some bad. Modun was happy to save himself the trouble, only needing to issue orders to the minor chieftains of each tribe. To put it bluntly, these allied tribal forces were just cannon fodder in his eyes. His own main force, the well-equipped, heavy-armored lancers, were all from his own tribe. He wouldn't deploy them easily, but kept them firmly in the center of his army. As for the 3,000 troops sent by the Shin tribe, they served more of a technical support role. For example, the siege engines, scaling ladders, and other such equipment brought by Modun's allied forces this time were provided and manufactured by the Shin tribe. The use and maintenance of this equipment were also handled by Shin tribe personnel. Shin tribe and Modun had a common enemy, the Han tribe, which formed the basis for their cooperation. Modun was responsible for providing troops and fighting, while the Shin tribe provided logistics and technical support. The two sides hit it off immediately. Even though Modun knew in his heart that he was likely being used as a pawn by the Shin tribe, he wouldn't let this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity pass. According to Modun's wishful thinking, by throwing all his forces into this campaign, he intended to crush the Han tribe's power on the grassland in one fell swoop. At that point, the Shin tribe would be far away and unable to intervene, and there would be no other rivals on the grassland capable of contending with him. The territories, population, and wealth left behind by the Han tribe, wouldn't he be able to manipulate them as he pleased? If he were given 2 years to digest and absorb them, he could completely break free from the Shin tribe's control. Dominating the entire grassland then wouldn't be an impossible feat. On the Han tribe's side, through the continuous stream of intelligence from their scouts, they had basically figured out Modun's troop deployment and equipment. Similarly, Modun's side hadn't been idle. They had also gathered some information about the Han tribe through their own scouts. However, the Han tribe's response strategy clearly exceeded Modun's expectations. He had originally thought that the Han tribe's main army would rely on the advantage of their strong city walls, hole up inside, and fight a protracted war of attrition with their superior iron armor and iron weapons. Yet, reality slapped him hard across the face when they heard that the Han tribe's 20,000-strong army had actually formed up far from the city, adopting a posture as if to engage them in open-field battle. All the leaders in Modun's allied army were utterly dumbfounded. What was the meaning of this? They didn't want their city anymore? They had foolishly come out to fight them head-on. Where did they get such confidence? A mere 20,000 armored soldiers dared to fight their 60,000-strong army to the death? Had they eaten a bear's heart and a leopard's gall? Modun was indeed very wary of the Han tribe, but this didn't mean he was afraid of them. Otherwise, he wouldn't have repeatedly opposed them. Thus, after a brief moment of astonishment, Modun very cautiously issued his first order. The main army would advance to a position 1,000 meters opposite the Han tribe's formation and halt. To observe the situation, he would first increase the pressure on them and see what tricks the Han tribe was up to. In Modun's view, a distance of 1,000 meters was already very safe. It was about 4 bow shots, the effective range of 4 volleys of arrows. Even if the Han tribe's archery was incredibly powerful, they couldn't possibly shoot arrows into his main army formation while remaining stationary. Moreover, for horses to accelerate from a standstill to a full charge, they needed at least 2 to 300 meters. If the Han tribe's cavalry were foolish enough to launch a surprise attack at this moment, he would have enough time to react and deploy his own army. Whether it was a head-on charge or maneuvering around the Han army's main force, he would have time to respond calmly. However, despite all his calculations, he had miscalculated. Because the Han tribe's cannons had officially been deployed, Modun would never have dreamed that. In fact, the moment his army had just come to a halt, they had already blundered right into the Han tribe's effective range. Rumble. Tens of thousands of war horses galloped simultaneously, the sound of their hooves like distant rolling thunder or a violent earthquake, shaking the very earth. The army advanced amidst billowing dust until it slowly halted about 1,000 meters, opposite the Han tribe's formation. Both sides entered a tense standoff. Modun patiently awaited the Han tribe's reaction. He even silently prayed that the Han tribe would actively surrender, or, upon seeing their superior numbers, wisely retreat into the city. In that case, he would have a greater certainty of slowly dealing with the Han tribe. Even if it meant fighting a protracted siege, he wouldn't hesitate. The fact that they had brought hundreds of long siege ladders this time showed that they were actually prepared for a direct assault on the city. Who knew the Han tribe would suddenly go crazy and come out to block them so far from the city, and at such a distance from it too? In Modun's eyes, this was utterly foolish. If the Han tribe showed even the slightest sign of defeat, they wouldn't even have a chance to escape back to the city. At such a distance, he would definitely be able to intercept all of the Han tribe's routed soldiers before they could flee back to the city. Then, with the city's forces even more depleted, they would have even less chance of resisting his allied army's attack. Meanwhile, in the Han army's main camp, Xue Tu, Chai Duoduo, Yuji, and others stood on a temporary wooden command platform. They could already clearly see the dense mass of the allied army, like a dark cloud pressing down, 1,000 meters away. Xue Tu took out a wooden range-finding card, specially made for artillerymen, from his pocket. After fiddling with it for a while, he still wasn't quite sure how far the enemy was. However, since they were clearly visible to the naked eye, the distance had to be at least 700 or 800 meters. This distance was well within the effective range of solid round shot. So, without a word, he directly ordered the artillerymen to begin loading ammunition. The order was quickly relayed through signal flags and drums. The personal guards also immediately sprang into action, running to each gun position to notify them individually. Soon the artillerymen received the order to fire. Angle of elevation 5 degrees, standard single charge, load solid spherical. Iron shot, firing method, volley fire. Due to thorough prior preparations, the artillerymen began loading ammunition in an orderly and rapid manner. After all, the basic calibration work had already been completed before the battle began. At the various gun positions between the Han Army's wagon laager, the artillerymen skillfully performed the standard procedures of aiming, swabbing the bore, loading powder, loading shot, and igniting. Then the gun captains one by one raised their indicator flags. Report, number 1 gun ready, number 2 gun ready, number 6 gun ready.